So today we're going to talk about Mongol rule in China, as well as later China, like after the time of the Mongol rule. So we left off with Genghis Khan, who was able to unite the Mongol tribes, and pretty much dominate and take over China. And he divides his kingdom up among his sons, and then his grandson, Kublai Khan, actually expands the empire even more. So Kublai Khan is Genghis Khan's grandson. He was able to conquer China in 1279 and began what is known as the Yuan dynasty. It wasn't exactly a time of peace. Millions of Chinese suffered from attacks, diseases, and property confiscations. Okay, so it wasn't a time of peace, but it was a time of expansion. Kublai Khan ruled over more land than anyone in world history. He was able to make the Mongol Empire the largest empire in world history. What was great about Kublai Khan was that he tolerated all religions. So when he took over an area, he didn't make them give up their religion. He allowed them to keep their religion, which helped keep the peace and helped take people over more easily. He did promote trade, and he opened up China to the world. So that was a big significance, promoting trade along the Silk Road. And we'll see a man named Marco Polo, who we're going to talk about in a minute, who he travels to China. He writes about China and inspires other people to travel there as well. So this is a depiction of Kublai Khan. And Marco Polo works for Kublai Khan for a while. So he was a Venetian trader. He's actually from Italy, who traveled to China and spent many years in service to Kublai Khan. He returned to Europe and he wrote about his experiences, and of course that inspired future generations to want to travel to China. So what makes him really famous is his writings and what he wrote about China and the way he depicted it. And we're going to watch a video about Marco Polo that shows you it gives you a little bit more background knowledge about Marco Polo.
Enjoy this movie, then visit brainpop.com for much more. Marco. 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 Wait a second. Dear Tim and Moby, can you tell me about Marco Polo? Thanks, Oscar. Hey, Oscar. Marco Polo was a 13th century European merchant. He was from Venice, but he spent more than 20 years traveling around Asia. His adventures helped introduce many Europeans to the Far East. Back in the Middle Ages, Europe wasn't the global power it is today. Instead of a few dozen countries, it was broken up into hundreds of tiny kingdoms. They were centered around walled cities, more like towns by today's standards. Outside of those walls, it was a dangerous no man's land. So in many places, people didn't engage much with the wider world. But Marco Polo's hometown of Venice was different. It was a city on the western end of the Silk Road. That was a network of trade routes connecting Europe to China. The Silk Road was 4,000 miles long, so few people made the full trip. Instead, they traveled to nearby cities to buy or sell goods. products would pass from city to city this way, like a relay race. Marco's father and uncle had made a nice little fortune doing that, but they couldn't help but wonder about the lands that produced the goods they traded in. So, Niccolo and Maffeo set out on an adventure. They left a few months before Marco was even born. He grew up wondering if he'd ever have a chance to meet his father. That day finally came when he was 15. Niccolo and Maffeo told of how they'd befriended Kublai Khan, ruler of China. His vast kingdom, the Mongol Empire, covered half the continent of Asia. The Khan was also curious about other regions. He asked the Polos to bring back scholars to teach him about European culture. While they were home, they invited Marco to join the family business, and thus began his 24-year odyssey into Asia. Well, the reason we know all about Marco instead of his uncle and father is because he wrote a book. The Travels of Marco Polo captivated readers with its incredible tales, like battling bandits, braving sandstorms, and encountering mythic beasts. A lot of that fantastic feel comes from Polo's co-author. Rustichello was a little-known author hoping to score a bestseller. He saw potential in Polo's travels, but wanted to inject them with action and drama. He was thinking more summer blockbuster than documentary film. The collection of tales was initially titled The Book of Marvels. It read like a catalog of all the astounding things Marco encountered. In Tibet, he came across immense cats covered in colorful stripes. In southern China, there were monstrous water lizards with huge jaws. He even saw a strange beast that looked like a unicorn crossed with a pig. No, they weren't made up at all. He had just never seen tigers before, or crocodiles, or rhinos, and neither had his readers. They loved the exotic details, especially when it came to the Khan's lavish life. 12,000 knights guarded his marble and gold palace, and each day he was presented with treasure from every corner of his kingdom. Polo's eye for intriguing detail also impressed Kublai Khan. The kingdom was so vast that the Khan couldn't go visit all of it, so he sent Polo on exploratory missions to the farthest reaches of the empire. After returning, Marco would tell the king vivid stories of what he'd seen. I don't think a European king would have been so welcoming toward a Chinese traveler, but the Khan was surprisingly tolerant of different cultures. He allowed his subjects to practice their own religion and follow their own traditions. The Mongol civilization was ahead of its time in other ways, too. They used heated rocks to keep their homes warm and take hot baths. Citizens could buy and sell goods with paper money. Europeans were centuries away from developing similar practices. Actually, many of Polo's readers were skeptical of such details. Their cities were supposed to be the centers of sophistication and progress. It was shocking to see how much they had to learn from Asian cultures. Today, modern scholars have their own reasons for doubt. Why isn't Polo mentioned at all in Mongol historical records? How could he leave out staples of Chinese life like tea and chopsticks? Most historians think the book is a mixture of fact and fiction. Polo definitely exaggerated more than a few of the stories, and probably borrowed other travelers' tales and blended them with his own. Well, the Khan died during Polo's return to Venice. The Mongol Empire split up into warring factions. That spelled the end of the Silk Road and safe routes east. Marco Polo never traveled to China again. Actually, the loss of the Silk Road had the opposite effect. Europeans sought other ways to get spices and textiles from the east. This period is known as the Age of Exploration. Many of its explorers, including Christopher Columbus, were inspired by Marco Polo. So, however much of the travels is made up, its impact is huge. To his dying day, Polo maintained that it was all true. When questioned about it, he replied, "I did not tell half of what I saw." There is no way I'm going to put that back on. Visit us at brainpop.com for more on this topic and hundreds of others. You'll find movies, games.
Okay, so as you can see, Marco Polo, his adventures to China is debated in history, whether what he saw was 100% fact or if it was a little bit of fiction mixed in with it. Obviously elaborated on the animals that he saw, but it's just because he'd never seen them before. So that was the only way he knew how to describe them. But of course, there are some details that, like in the videos that the video said, like why did he leave some of this important Chinese culture out of his writings? Okay, but that's what a lot of history is, and how we put together what possibly really happened is you have to pull from different sources. So after the Mongol Empire, we have the Ming Dynasty. It lasted from 1368 to 1644. The founder was Emperor Zhu Yongzheng, and he was a peasant who actually rebelled against Mongol rule. He helped China in two ways. He helped it by repairing irrigation systems and distributing land to the poor peasant farmers. He hurt China by becoming a despot who had over 100,000 executed for treason. So he went a little overboard when it came to executions, especially what he thought was treason. It's probably a little bit of paranoia from the fact that he rebelled against the Mongol rule. Xing he was a sailor who traveled along the Asian and African coasts, and he helped spread Chinese trade and culture. After his death, the Ming forbade exploration and restricted trade. So why would they do that? Trade brings in a good amount of money. It helps the nations prosper. So why would he do that? So some suspicions would be that Zheng He brought too much glory upon himself and not on the empire, not on the emperor. And it's believed that China actually saw the outside world as inferior. And so after he dies, exploration for China stops, and they restrict trade on the Silk Road, and it's kind of shut off from the rest of the world for a while. This is a depiction of Zheng He. So after the next dynasty is the Qing dynasty. It was established in 1644 and lasted to 1912 AD. Okay, so just a little over 100 years ago is when that dynasty ended. It was founded by the Manchu who invaded from the north. They adopted Chinese ways in order to keep the peace and to be able to kind of maintain control. China doubled in size during the Qing dynasty, and the population grew rapidly to what you kind of know today. Puyi, the last emperor of China, was forced to step down in 1912. Okay, that's really not that long ago, just a little over 100 years ago. To kind of put it into perspective for you guys, 1912 is the year that the Titanic sunk. Okay, just to give a little, to know where you're at in history. Okay, and so that ends our unit on China.